The night of wind and sand. A bone chip changed meaning 3 times. Luck on the card table, a seal on wax, then swinging at the water gate. I thought I had seen enough betrayals until a rancher burned a land ledger to save a Mexican girl, and the law turned as fast as a gun cocking. So, who betrayed whom? I saw Jonas Hale tap the bone chip on the saloon table, the sound dry like a pebble. 1 tap, stop, tap again. His eyes did not blink, fixed on the spread of cards in front of Caleb Pryor. Cigarette smoke coiled over the rim of an untouched whiskey glass, the ring clinging to the edge like resin. The dark wood table was cut with scratches. In the deepest groove, a streak of dried red wax, curved at the edge like a tired smile. The chip lay in Jonas's palm, smooth bone, edges rounded down. On its surface, a faint carved seal of a swallow, and the word county circling it. When he turned it, the oil lamp caught on the carving, flashing like a wet fisheye. I sat angled aside, watching from the table's edge. Caleb's silver ring threw a gleam into my eyes each time his pinky flexed against the cards. The ceiling fan whined faintly, its blades slow as labored breath. Caleb wore a thick silver ring, the face scratched thin. His fingers slid over the cards as if not touching. The dealer, Floyd, pushed each card with the edge of his nail. The nail of his pinky was scorched, black, like a match head. He counted evenly. 1, 2, 3. The last card skimmed Jonas's whiskey glass, leaving a thin, wet streak like a line of rain. Jonas did not reach. He tapped the chip on the table instead, speaking without words. "Bet," Caleb said, his voice rough with smoke. He jerked his chin toward the pot in the center. A dented iron bowl, its enamel flaked white around the rim. Silver coins stacked, some $50, a few small gold pieces, and an empty shell casing someone had dropped for luck. Beer foam touched the rim, swelling, then gone. Jonas drew an old leather wallet from his coat. Its edge pinched a folded quarter sheet of paper, the corners yellow, creased like an old cut. He laid both wallet and paper on the table beside the chip. Floyd's hands froze for one breath. Caleb glanced down, the corner of his mouth twitching by reflex. I saw a round violet stamp show half clear. Helena, medical, tear. Beneath the fold, small printed words leaked like shavings. Diagnosis, sterile. Jonas did not look at the paper. He looked at Caleb. Dust drifted in from the door crack, brushing the glanced at the ring, then at Jonas. Jonas did not move. His hand pressed the chip, thumb grinding the carved seal. The veins along his wrist bulged dark like old rope. The saloon door swung open. Wind blew in, dragging the high chime screech thin and long like a heated wire. A Mexican girl stood against the frame, a brass tag on her wrist, leather strap looped twice, its iron clasp scratched. She did not cry. She looked at the chip in Jonas's hand. She did not blink. I saw her gaze climb from the chip to his wrist, then halt on the folded paper. Not long, but enough for the wall clock to tick once hard. Pryor. Jonas spoke the name, nothing else. With his wrist, he slid the doctor's paper toward the center, the violet seal full in view. Caleb looked down. His ringed finger pressed the corner barely, like testing grain. Floyd spread both hands, feigning innocence, but his boot drew back half a step, heel tapping wood. A signal, I guessed. Behind me, a chair scraped faint, as if someone had risen, then thought better. "More," Caleb repeated. This time he pulled a bundle of papers from his coat. its corner wrapped in thin board, tied with twine, sealed in yellow wax. The wax bore the same swallow mark as the chip, but sharper, newer. He laid it beside the iron bowl. He did not say what it was. No one asked. Jonas looked at the bundle, then at the brass tag on the girl's wrist. The chip in his hand turned a quarter round. The lamplight brushed county and went dark. He slid the chip toward the bowl. It scraped the wood, stopped exactly at the old red wax mark, touched it once, as if touching a healed scar. Caleb set 2 fingers on his cards, pushed them an inch, not flipped. Jonas did not touch his. He set a finger on the doctor's paper, drew it back a fraction, enough to show one more line in italics. No evidence of motility. Then he let go. No one laughed. No one coughed. I heard clear the sound of a fly hitting the lamp glass and falling on the table beside me. Floyd coughed light, stale liquor in it. He shifted the deck away to the left, leaving a space between the 2 men. Odd, as if carving a piece of air from the saloon. The saloon keeper set a glass on the tray. A drop of water falling on her hand, she left it. The girl stayed in the doorway. Wind blew her hair across her cheek. The brass tag on her wrist struck her coarse shirt button, a faint clink like a coin on dry ground. "What lies in the bundle?" a voice asked low from the corner. No one answered. Caleb lifted his silver ring, stared into its face as if at himself. He raised his chin toward the girl. Jonas followed. I heard horse tack creak outside, someone tying tighter. Caleb shoved another flat-carved face up, so the whole saloon saw county. Someone drew breath. Someone stared at their boots. The girl stepped 1 pace in. Only 1. Across the dust-lit strip at the door. Into the dimmer air. Her left foot dragged, faint, shoe heel split. The leather strap dug deeper into her wrist, leaving a fine red line. She stopped 3 paces from the table. Fresh horse sweat still clung. The smell of open plains. The iron tang of brass warmed by sun. Caleb tilted his head, smile thin as a knife score. He tapped his ring against the iron bowl. The last stake. He did not name her. He did not need to. The whole saloon knew what the last stake was. When he looked at the brass tag on her wrist, then at the bone chip on the table. The saloon keeper bit her lip. Her hand touched her own neck, as if to check whether she wore a tag. Jonas pulled the doctor's paper closer, tapped the seal lightly with his nail, as if reminding someone to count a beat. He did not look at the girl. He set his finger on the chip's edge, pushed it into the bowl. The chip slid past Caleb's silver ring, brushed it, soft, no sound. Then it stopped on top of the coins, higher than a few. The rim of the bowl trembled faintly. "Call," Jonas said. 1 word, not loud. No need. His finger did not shake. The joints stood veined. The skin there, like rope, dried in sun. The gun at his left hip lay still, the holster mouth polished from touch. His eyes the same, unblinking, not searching, and promising nothing. Caleb laughed through his nose. He pulled the twine-bound bundle toward him, then, very slowly, pushed it back to the table's center, for all to see the yellow wax stamped with the swallow. "Valid," he said, low. Floyd nodded. He had not looked at the cards. I thought he did not need to. Caleb pressed his palm to his spread of cards, held them, did not turn. "More," he said a 3rd time, But this time he did not push coins. He tapped his ringed finger on the old red wax stain where Jonas's chip had struck earlier. A dry knock. His eyes flicked to the doctor's paper, very quick. Jonas followed. I saw his neck tighten, his throat swallow, soundless. The paper curled at a corner in the draft. The violet seal showed half more. The type stood clearer. Clinical note. Semen analysis. Nil. No one read it out loud. No need. The nil dropped like a pebble into the iron bowl. No sound. But all heard it. The girl stepped one more. Her shadow fell on the table edge, covering half the chip. The saloon's breath shifted. Outside, whoos passed, clopped steady, then faded. Jonas drew his finger back from the paper. He laid his palm flat on the table, pressed into the wood scars. His fingertips touched the old red wax, its brittle edge crumbling into powder, clinging like chalk. Call, Jonas said again. Same voice. Caleb looked at him longer than courtesy allowed. The silver ring turned slightly, stopped at the scratch, the lamplight striking wrong. Floyd raised the deck an inch, set it down. He did not open. He waited. The chime shifted with the wind, blowing straight in. Dust slipped through the crack, sprinkling the table like salt. The bone chip trembled faintly, just enough to make County shimmer like lips holding silence. The iron bowl brushed the empty shell, its note off, longer than usual. The saloon keeper gripped the bar edge, her fingers pale. No one moved, no one saved, no one stopped it. Each held one thing of their own: ring, rag, glass, ledger, tag, and chip. Each spoke a different tongue. They spoke for us. Floyd swallowed. Your turn, he whispered, eyes on none. Jonas shifted weight. The wood chair groaned. Caleb pushed his cards forward an inch, his ring finger on the top edge, like a man's hand on a coffin lid, before lifting. Outside, someone cinched reins, the knot squeaked taut. The wind chime shrieked one long line, then snapped, still. No one turned. We sat there as if hearing something pass by, a train without rails, a wind from nowhere. The bone chip lay still on the silver, carved face up, swallow, seal, staring at the man with the ring. Jonas's eyes did not blink. Caleb's eyes did not leave. The girl's eyes clung to the chip as Floyd gathered the cards, his burnt pinky shoving each. He glanced toward Caleb, then toward Jonas. No eyes met. The brass tag on the girl's wrist swung, its shadow sweeping the table like charcoal. Jonas ended the hand in one move. He took back the chip, closed his fingers round the carving. Caleb tore the twine of his bundle, the yellow wax split a groove. He pushed the papers to the bowl's rim. Jonas did not touch. The girl stayed, her eyes on the chip. Done, Floyd said low. He wanted someone to pocket the pot. No one did. Jonas rose first. His coat brushed the table's edge. A thread caught in the wood's gouge. He freed it with his nail, never looking. The chip dropped from his palm into his coat pocket, dry sound, like nail on button. Caleb lifted his ring, tapped once on the bowl. The bowl hushed. Jonas turned his back to the door. The girl stepped after him. Half a beat. No call needed. Her tag scraped the doorframe, left a fine scratch. The saloon keeper held her rag. Her eyes followed them to the sill. Floyd capped the deck, breathed through teeth. Caleb rose last. His heels scraped hard, as if to shake dust. By the dead fly near the lamp, dust had ringed small, and someone had drawn a short line across it with a matchstick tip. No one claimed it. On the porch, the reins stretched a long sound. Jonas set his boot on the stirrup, the gun stock brushing the chair's side. The girl clung to the back of the saddle, cracked boot heel split, sand blown in. The brass tag struck the knife at his hip. Again a faint knock. No one said more. They left town when the sun leaned low. The wheels cut across dried mud, the cracks like bird feet breaking under weight. Dust rose behind each hoofbeat, clung to the hem of Jonas's jeans, stuck to the leather belt. The town's last post passed behind like the last nail driven in a coffin lid. The church bell struck 3 times, hollow. On the hill, old grass scraped the axle, shrilled a line. Jonas handed the water canteen to her. Heavy in hand, its tin dented at one side. She did not touch lips, as if not thirsty. Her eyes stayed on the cloth sack tied at the rear saddle, drawstring mouth stiff with dirt and sweat, rimmed with white salt. Each jolt opened at 1 finger's width. She watched, as if counting the mouths stuck open close. Jonas drew the string tight with 2 fingers, tied a knot even, light and sure. He did not look at her. His left hand brushed his coat pocket for a moment. The chip inside, warming by body. Past mesquite, shadows clawed marks on the horse's back. A wagon loaded with posts came against them, wheels rattling loose spokes. The driver's hat torn, he glanced once at the girl, then away. The brass tag on her wrist caught sun, flashed sharp, then gone, showed round stones. Jonas stopped the horse, bent to dip his hand. The cool water cut the dust, left a clean streak on his wrist. He splashed the mane, drops sprayed her face. She did not wipe. Her eyes stayed on the sack. At its mouth, 1 thread pulled loose like a tendon. She pressed it, left a faint, dirty mark. Jonas tightened the cinch, leather cracking dry. He opened his coat pocket an inch, touched the chip, only to know it stayed. At the stone pass, the trail narrowed, horses in single line. Jonas first, her behind. Side wind puffed his coat wide, then slapped it down, the hem falling on the sack's mouth. She leaned aside. The brass tag struck the sack rim, clicked. Her hand slipped in, drew out a shred of cloth, then dropped it back. No one looked at the other. Their shadows stretched like 2 charcoal strokes, clung together a span, then split. Past the boundary post, sunlight broke in shards, splintered on horse heads. Jonas stopped at a dead cactus, snapped 1 branch, wedged it in the saddle strap so it would not rub the belly. She lifted her foot, checked the boot heel, nail head exposed, tilted. She struck heel twice on ground, set it right, no words. When shadows shortened, they crossed a hard plain, ground like an operating slab. Jonas offered the canteen again. She took it, raised it, did not touch lips. Her eyes fixed on the sack's mouth. The wrist with the brass tag bent back, the clasp scratch open, red. A crow circled above, its shadow swept the horse's back, black as a stick snapped. At the ranch, oil lamps burned low. Wind slipped the cracks, bent the flame once, lamp smoke twisted like torn cloth. Jonas set bread on the table. A dagger laid cross like a guard, its curved hilt, spine catching firelight, edge sharp as tin lid fresh cut. He set down a block of hard cheese, its side chipped into jagged teeth. The wooden table held an old oval scorch where a hot pan had once sat. Jonas hung his coat on a nail, hooked by a strip of copper wire. The coat swung light, its pocket knocking the chair back, a dull knock. He went to the stable. Hoof struck trough, squeaked, ropes rubbed hard as bones scraped. I stood by the door, watching the girl. She circled the kitchen, touched the cornmeal jar lip, left a shallow half-moon dent. She bent to the stove, stuffed coal chips, pinched the iron grate out an inch, let air in. Bricks cracked small. The sack dropped on the bench. its mouth opened one breath. Inside, the bone chip edged out, carved face down, county ring half shown. The chip touched a wooden spoon rim, faint like tooth on porcelain. She glanced to the stable, then tugged the string. Table edge, horse sweat and dry smoke rising from coat. He said, "Eat." One word fell like stone. No ripple. He pulled the dagger lengthwise, cut bread in two, handed one piece. She took with both hands. Her nails brushed the spine, pulled back. Crumbs fell across the old burn mark. Jonas took salt, shook. White grains rolled across, hit the dried red wax trace like in the saloon, and stopped. She lifted the sack, pushed it against the bench leg. The tie slipped one notch, then tightened back from damp grit. The chip rolled half inside, made a low, weighty sound, unlike spoonwood. Jonas turned to the basin, drew water, poured into iron kettle. Over his shoulder I saw his hand flex, close twice, touching nothing. His coat brushed the bench back, the sack quivered. She watched the feel, not direct. The brass tag edge tapped the salt a light knock. He set the gun on its hook, barrel down. He swept a coal back into the stove with the knife hilt, shut the stove half. While he pushed the kettle in, his other hand slipped below the bench where the sack lay. No rustle, no string, only a faint exhale. When he turned back, the bone chip lay in his palm. No one saw it leave. He did not look at her. She did not lift her eyes. I looked at the chip, saw a new stain. Horse grease smeared the rim. Jonas placed the chip on the table, on the dust of salt, carved face up. County ring full, the swallow facing the door, as if guarding the wind's path in. He said nothing. On the porch, the reins stretched a long sound. Jonas set his boot on the stirrup, the gunstock brushing the chair's side. The girl clung to the back of the saddle, cracked boot heel split, sand blown in. The brass tag struck the knife at his hip, again a faint knock. No one said more. They left town when the sun leaned low. The wheels cut across dried mud, the cracks like bird feet breaking under weight. Dust rose behind each hoofbeat, clung to the hem of Jonas's jeans, stuck to the leather belt. The town's last post passed behind like the last nail driven in a coffin lid. The church bell struck 3 times, hollow. On the hill, old grass scraped the axle, shrilled a line. Jonas handed the water canteen to her, heavy in hand, its tin dented at one side. She did not touch lips. As if not thirsty, her eyes stayed on the cloth sack tied at the rear saddle, drawstring mouth stiff with dirt and sweat, rimmed with white salt. Canteen in its rack, tin striking wood harsh. His heel pressed the horse belly, changed gait. Far off, someone's windmill turned, its blades whining like teeth ground. Through a dry creek, the bed showed round stones. Jonas stopped the horse, bent to dip his hand. The cool water cut the dust, left a clean streak on his wrist. He splashed the mane. Drops sprayed her face. She did not wipe. Her eyes stayed on the sack. At its mouth, one thread pulled loose like a tendon. She pressed it, left a faint, dirty mark. Jonas tightened the cinch, leather cracking dry. He opened his coat pocket an inch, touched the chip, only to know it stayed. At the stone pass, the trail narrowed. Horses in single line. Jonas first, her behind. Side wind puffed his coat wide, then slapped it down, the hem falling on the sack's mouth. She leaned aside. The brass tag struck the sack rim, clicked. Her hand slipped in, drew out a shred of cloth, then dropped it back. No one looked at the other. Their shadows stretched like two charcoal strokes, clung together a span, then split. Past the boundary post, sunlight broke in shards, splintered on horse heads. Jonas stopped at a dead cactus, snapped one branch, wedged it in the saddle strap so it would not rub the belly. She lifted her foot, checked the boot heel, nail head exposed, tilted. She struck heel twice on ground, set it right. No words. When shadows shortened, they crossed a hard plain, ground like an operating slab. Jonas offered the canteen again. She took it, raised it, did not touch lips. Her eyes fixed on the sack's mouth. The wrist with the brass tag bent back, the clasp scratch open, red. A crow circled above, its shadow swept the horse's back, black as a stick snapped. At the ranch, oil lamps burned low. Wind slipped the cracks, bent the flame once. Lamp smoke twisted like torn cloth. Jonas set bread on the table. A dagger laid cross, like a guard, its curved hilt, spine catching firelight, edge sharp as tin lid fresh cut. He set down a block of hard cheese, its side chipped into jagged teeth. The wooden table held an old oval scorch, where a hot pan had once sat. Jonas hung his coat on a nail, hooked by a strip of copper wire. The coat swung light, its pocket knocking the chair back, a dull knock. He went to the stable. Hoof struck trough, squeaked. Ropes rubbed hard as bones scraped. I stood by the door, watching the girl. She circled the kitchen, touched the cornmeal jar lip, left a shallow half-moon dent. She bent to the stove, stuffed coal chips, pinched the iron grate out an inch, let air in. Bricks cracked small. The sack dropped on the bench, its mouth opened one breath. Inside, the bone chip clasp turned sideways like an upturned eye. She washed hands brief. 2 drops fell on her boot, soaked, dark spots. Jonas came back. He passed the bench, his gaze not lowered. He braced his hand on the table edge, horse sweat and dry smoke rising from coat. He said, "Eat." One word fell like stone, no ripple. He pulled the dagger lengthwise, cut bread in 2, handed one piece. She took with both hands, her nails brushed the spine, pulled back. Crumbs fell across the old burn mark. Jonas took salt, shook. White grains rolled across, hit the dried red wax trace like in the saloon, and stopped. She lifted the sack, pushed it against the bench leg. The tie slipped one notch, then tightened back from damp grit. The chip rolled half inside, made a low, weighty sound, unlike spoonwood. Jonas turned to the basin, drew water, poured into iron kettle. Over his shoulder I saw his hand flex, close twice, touching nothing. His coat brushed the bench back, the sack quivered. She watched the feel, not direct. The brass tag edge tapped the salt, a light knock. He set the gun on its hook, barrel down. He swept a coal back into the stove with the knife hilt, shut the stove half. While he pushed the kettle in, his other hand slipped below the bench, where the sack lay. No rustle, no string. Only a faint exhale. When he turned back, the bone chip lay in his palm. No one saw it leave. He did not look at her. She did not lift her eyes. I looked at the chip, saw a new stain. Horse grease smeared the rim. Jonas placed the chip on the table, on the dust of salt. Carved face up. County ring full, the swallow facing the door, as if guarding the wind's path in. He said nothing. No one asked. The windmill outside creaked steady, its rhythm like a needle looping back and forth through one seam. The coal stove crackled, corn husk shells snapping inside. Wind scraped the slats, the crack whining faint. A horse in the stall coughed, its foam struck the trough, dripping sharp into the straw. Jonas sat still, his back pressed the chair, shoulders heavy. His thumb pinned the edge of the chip flat on the table. The nails smudged with soot, Dirt sunk into the carved groove like ink. He pressed the same spot where the chip had touched the brass tag earlier in the saloon, as if resetting an old mark. His eyes stayed on the chip, no need to look at anyone. She sat opposite, both hands set apart on the table, space just wide enough for one blade to pass. The brass tag lay beside her hand, clasp turned sideways, its serrated back flashing once in the fire, then gone. Her eyes moved past Jonas's thumb pressing the chip, circled the edge, then stopped at the dagger. No blink. A fresh dust across the O in county broke at the rim. Jonas did not wipe. His thumb pressed still, force enough to hold the chip from turning as the droplet sought its path. On the wall, the windmill's shadow spun, but not whole, cut by beams, broken into dashes. Each dash across the table changed the dagger's gleam. The dagger lay crosswise, its point aimed at the gap between them. Its hilt pitted where fingers had held, each pit like a fisheye dried. No one touched the blade. A fly struck the rim of the salt dish, tore its wing, dropped. It lay beside the horse grease stain on the chip, not touching, its legs folded in. Still, its shadow small as a pinhead. Jonas shifted his thumb a little, not lifting. The chip did not slide. The windmill's moan outside bent one pitch higher, short, sharp. The wind had turned angle. The slats rattled twice, then lay still. The curtain brushed the table edge, swept one salt grain down. It struck the floor in a sound no one heard. She looked at Jonas. Jonas did not look back, his eyes fixed on the chip, his wrist a line of blue vein up to the fold. Beneath skin, the pulse struck in time with the mill's creak. The chip cooled under his thumb. The carved letters stayed. The swallow still faced the door, where dust had ceased to come. The kettle choked, lid clapped once. Jonas did not lift his thumb. She did not touch the brass tag. The dagger lay cross. The smell of linseed rose thin from the chair arms. The stove cracked again. One ember shot out, died before the floor. And still. Only the wind. Only the iron belly of the mill. Only the thumb pressed to the edge of bone. And the distance wide enough for one word to pass between them without a mouth speaking. Morning. Dew dusted fine as flour on the courthouse frame. Jonas pushed the door. The pig-belly stove in the corner breathed blue smoke, the ash smell thick. He walked straight to the desk, bone chip in hand. He struck it down, dry, tight as a coffin lid shut. The swallow carved on the chip threw a strange gleam across the ledger page. Caleb Pryor sat behind the desk, vest tight, silver ring on left hand. The drawer at his side hung open, rim smeared with old red wax, twine sticking like fish gut. His hand stalled on the quill, one small hitch, then pulled back as from heat. He cleared his throat without sound, eyes flicking down to the chip, then up to Jonas, then sliding toward the stove. The registry entries lay in rows, paper brittle, corners curled brown. Each line bore a small round box marked seal. Wax shrunk dry, cracked like snakeskin. On the desk sat a wooden stamp. He pulled the drawer, its grown like an old man shifting. He dragged out a cloth-bound book, tied cross with twine, yellow wax sealed. A swallow rose in ivory on it, its lines sharp, cut deep. Heat from the stove drifted across the desk, softened old wax on the paper's edge, dulled its sheen. Jonas stood straight, his other hand braced the desk, wood grain swollen, nail scraping a scratch thin as a knife score. I stood by the door, the board clerk hung crooked, clacking as wind passed. Caleb drew the silver ring across the ledger's edge as if testing line, his face plain, but around his eyes the skin drew a fine line. He untied the twine, picked the wax nub, its residue sticking under nail, pulled thin like candy. He opened to the page with a marker. The paper rasped. Black ink. Typed words even as marching steps. At the last column, one line shorter, indented, "Guardianship transfer, water ration exchange." Caleb set his fingertip in the empty circle at the page's edge. He did not use the wooden stamp. He held the bone chip like a die. The swallow face pressed down to the seal box. Jonas did not stop him. I heard the breath in the room change, as if someone had just held air back. He pressed light. No wax there, only paper and ink. But the circle revealed a hidden mark. A serrated trace from the chip's edge fit the printed ring, leaving white space inside like an open bird's eye. Caleb did not ink. He only set the chip flat, turned it a quarter round. The swallow faced the stove, not the door. Then he lifted the chip, laid it back before Jonas, as if nothing had happened. The swallow on the chip matched the swallow stamped on last night's wax bundle. No one said matched. No need. The clerk stopped brushing ash. He looked up over his glasses. His eyes struck the bird's gleam, then dropped to the stove, as if fearing the fire might hear. "Certificate," Caleb said, voice thin. He marked the margin with pen, signed below in blue, his name drying fast as dry air. "Enough." He slid to the next sheet, slowed one beat when reaching the column "Water Allotment, Pipe 3B." There the word "Approved," stamped in purple, had bled wide like a bruise. Jonas drew the chip back to himself, his thumb on the county rim. He turned it once, the grind of bone on wood like a pebble in a pocket falling. His eyes unblinking, his jaw slanted 1 degree. I saw his throat jerk when reading the line, "Transfer guardianship." A dry swallow without sound. The room sank 1 notch quieter. The stove popped once, then dead. Outside the window, the windmill on the hill turned its face. Its shadow slid across the sealed paper wall, cutting the words in straight strokes. Out the land deed. Hard cover, purple county stamp at the head. And the brand registration, thinner sheet, with a burned fork symbol, cattle mark. He set both on the table beside the chip. The clerk rose, chair scraping a long scar on the floor, his eyes running the lines like rats along rafters. Sweat slipped from his temple to the edge of his glasses. Stopped there, did not fall. Caleb tugged the right door, pulled out the trade register. Dark cloth cover, corners frayed, fibers loose. Yellow wax at its edge peeled in flakes, revealing an older stamp. The same swallow as on the bone chip. He dropped the book heavy on the table, paper dust rising, floating slow through the slice of sun from the window. He opened it with both hands. The middle page showed bold print. Guardianship, transfer, in exchange for irrigation water. Beneath, the description, the girl's name, identifying mark, wrist brass tag, height estimated, and a small box stamped received. On the right margin, a water allotment table, pipe 3B, 15% dry season. The words shortened into bureaucratic code. The purple ink smeared at season from some old drop of sweat long dried. Caleb took the chip from before Jonas. This time he pressed it flat against the candle, softened the bone face, then set it on the page's corner like a stamp. But the chip did not take ink. It only slid, left a dull sheen like oil. He flicked his eyes at the clerk. That one fumbled open a cabinet, drew a box of red wax. He pinched a lump, held it to flame till soft, rolled it round, set it on the seal box. Caleb pressed the chip down. The wax spread into the grooves, swallowed the carving. The swallow printed whole, each feather line sharp. The smell of hot wax and wand bone mixed, thick as a debt unspoken. Jonas looked at the mark just pressed. His hand did not touch the chip. His nail pressed the edge of his brand paper. At the line of his name, Jonas Hale, forked brand. The underline cut one letter too far. Across Hale, by a fraction, as if rushed before. Caleb closed the register, bound it tight. He nodded at the clerk. The man lifted the book, hurried to the iron safe for filing. Passing the desk, his coat brushed the chip. Turned it slightly. The swallow faced Jonas. The belly stove cracked once more. Resin popping. Flame shifted blue to yellow, thin plates of its iron wall glowed. In the corner tray, a stack of water records slanted. One sheet slipped, showing the line. Pipe 3B, Hale, temp approval. The word temp crossed twice in different ink. Caleb's time to say, don't. Jonas turned, carried the papers and chip straight to the stove. Its mouth gaped, its flame tongue long like an animal. He pulled the draft lever, the fire leapt. He looked once over his shoulder, not at people, at the swallow on the chip. The swallow stared into the flame. He threw the stack in, not tossed, not dropped. A heavy motion, final, like shutting a coffin lid with a brick. The fire bit the words. Ink shrank, curled into edges. The deed cracked like an old man's joints. The brand sheet rolled, the fork mark twisted into a hook, split. The bone chip slid free, dropped from the pile's top, rolled to the coal rim, struck stone with a faint snap. The smell of burning hide rose harsh, mixed with stove oil into yellow smoke. The clerk screamed, but only his mouth opened, no sound. He ran 2 steps, stopped. Caleb lunged forward, hand out as if to catch letters turned ash. His silver ring caught the candle flame, flared. He pulled back. Heat warped his face for a second. Jonas did not step back. He took the coal tongs, lifted the chip from the fire before it darkened. Its edge scorched brown at one point, the swallow still whole. He laid it on the stove rim to cool, ivory clinking, iron thin. His gaze never left the flame. I saw his palm pale where the tongs bit too hard. Caleb slammed the desk. "Mad!" he spat, but behind the word stretched emptiness, long. The clerk grabbed the sand bucket, scooped, but Jonas raised his hand open, silent. The man froze, sand pattering back into the bucket like rain on gravel. The wax seal in the trade book still fresh on its page. But Jonas's deed was gone. Jonas's brand paper, gone. Wind through the door seam fanned the stove. Fire rose and ate the last white edge. The swallow on the chip looked into fire once more, then lay still, its ivory blush like dried blood. Caleb blew hard, his shoulders lifted, his voice strained back to official tone. No deed, no rights, no water shares, no standing to trade. Each dash nailed into his own mouth. He turned to the clerk. "Minutes, cancel." He swallowed the last word as if swallowing grit. His tongue stuck to his palate, sweat ran sideways to his ear. Jonas lifted the chip from the stove rim, set it back on the desk where it had begun. The swallow turned toward Caleb. He did not speak. He placed his fingertip at the seal box on the trade register's open page, did not press, only set. The fresh wax on the prior page still smelled hot. That smell now served only memory. For one short beat, the courthouse hushed like a morgue. The wall clock ticked, its gear teeth rasped faint. Far off, the hill windmill inside its cover. A drip fell on his ring, left a gray-white streak. He blew the candle out, black smoke coiling into a thread. He raised his head at Jonas, his eyes no longer plain, not angry, not pleading, only empty. Jonas straightened his coat, right hand smoothing it flat, left hand brushing the chip once more, as if to test its warmth. He turned. His boot heel struck the floor twice, stopped at the doorframe. Wind from the porch pushed in a chill, touched the stove's heat, made the flame shiver like a string unplayed. He paused half a second in the doorway. His shadow cut to sunstrip, fell on the wall, covered the clerkboard hole. Then he left, the bone chip still on the desk, the swallow facing Caleb's seat like an eye. I looked into the stove. The papers were ash, their edges red like a forge's heart. On top, a shard of the letters H.A. rolled loose, turned once slow, then collapsed. The smell of hide burning stayed thick on the tongue. Outside, a horse whinnied short. The windmill kept turning. No one laughed. No one said, "Done." On the table's edge, the fresh wax seal of the swallow was still warm. In the stove, Wrights had turned smoke, and between, the chip, once called luck, lay still, like an ivory-wrapped knife, neither kept nor used, only watching. The water gate was locked, the trough dry at bottom, cracked mud spread like cattle hide, fissures branching like old leather. The herd lowed hoarse. Their calls dragged long, then broke. Wind pushed dust across the broken fence. The grain stuck thin on wire, grinding against each other like needles. Jonas carried 2 buckets, iron handles, knocking his shoulders with hollow clinks. He walked to the valve post. There, the new lock shone bright, burrs not yet filed. Its head still bore a streak of wax not cooled. The swallow stamped deep, sharper than old marks, a seal done without word. He scratched a thin red fiber from its edge, brittle as dried sinew. Pipe 3B showed faded paint. The drained water left white salt rings along its side. Jonas tried the lever. It held. Wax clogged a thread. His hand slipped. Skin raised the white welt. He switched hands. The lever stayed. Beyond the fence, eucalyptus leaves rasped like sandpaper. I stood 2 steps back, saw the wax pressed into the lock mouth like teeth. The alarm bell cord twitched once, no one hearing. A calf leapt into the empty trough, its nose sniffing cracked mud, squealed thin, then stopped, tongue licking the wood rim dry. Jonas set the buckets down, hollow sound. He bent low to check the stop nut under the valve, its teeth still slick with golden grease. On its screw, a black smear where its edge scorched brown at one point, the swallow facing the door. The girl placed it down with 2 fingers, soft, as if laying a word on flat wood. Marisol Vega. She spoke her name, voice even. She pushed the chip toward Jonas, half a knuckle, nothing more. Then set beside it a torn scrap of paper, palm-sized, scribbled names, 1 location. A release stamp crossed pale. At the bottom, a shallow wax mark, not the swallow, only the clerk's scrawl, perfunctory. "I took it last night," she said, her eyes fixed on the scorched rim of the chip. "Gave it to Caleb, for my family's release paper." Only that. On her wrist, the brass tag tapped the table edge, each beat a word none of us could hear. Jonas turned his face away. His chin touched the shadow of himself on the wall. His right hand crushed the dagger's hilt, lying cross on the table, until his skin blanched, then flushed. The blade did not rise. Not rising was a choice. Outside, wind cut the windmill blades. Its rhythm turned 1 pitch sharper. Marisol pulled the leather strap on her wrist straight, the clasp sideways, its back scarred by old cuts. She pushed the scrap deeper across the table, an inch, until it touched the chip, the paper whispering, then still. No plea, no explanation. The air between them shifted heat. I saw the dry sweat mark along the paper edge, shaped like a finger pressed before ink dried. Its corner lifted in draft, could be pinned with the knife. Jonas did not pin. He left the dagger cross, his thumb still set on the chip's rim as last night. Outside, the herd's calls layered, broken. Night closed early. They went to the water release by the ridge path, not the main gate. I followed behind. Cold wind through dry corn rose, whispering like mouths. Marisol wrapped a dark scarf, hair hidden in hat, eyes fixed forward. Jonas carried a hooded lantern, wick low, gun at left hip, right hand with iron pliers. The outlet door bore fresh wax, swallow raised, still warm. Beside it, the water team's oil drum stood open, sharp smell rising. One water guard leaned on a post, vest unbuttoned, ledger poking his pocket. He turned at the sand's spill. Too late. Jonas pressed the gun barrel into his lower back. Enough touch, no words. The guard's eyes bounced off Marisol's face, stopped at her brass tag, then fell to the lever. "Sign," Jonas said, one word, as his other hand tore the ledger from his pocket. The return sheet showed, its seal box blank. Marisol yanked set it by the word returned. "Sign," Jonas repeated. The guard bent like soaked wood, his letters crooked by his tremor, ink rasping the grain. Marisol clipped the sheet, dropped the lever back. The water still surged, one beat, foamed against the trough rim, then ebbed. Jonas tucked the register into his coat. The lantern light brushed the chip. The swallow flashed once. They drew back through the fence path. Behind, the trough filled. Cattle pressed muzzles, their breath heavy over the water. Overhead, crows shifted their circle. Morning. The marshal came. His cloak still full of dust, his horse dark with chest sweat. He did not bring the wooden seal. He raised his left hand, on it a silver ring set with flat ivory, carved with a swallow variant, wings a fraction longer, tail sharper. He pressed the ring into wax on the county desk set at the water gate. The smell of hot wax rose sharper. The ivory mark deeper, the ring's edge bit the wax like teeth. Caleb stood beside, a stack of papers dry as fishbone, ink fixed before it had time to blur. He lifted. "Order to revoke last night's seal, emergency allotment, suspension of temporary grant." Each sheet stamped once, the ring's mark pressed over the chip's mark, fresh wax swallowing old. Yesterday's hold slid from Jonas like pebbles from a boot, struck ground with a dull thud. Jonas stood straight, his bare hand never touching paper. Marisol stood near, her brass tag shaking light, clasp tapping her wristbone. The wind turned. The hill mill faced another way, its blades short in sound. The marshal clapped once, the water crew pinned the lever with a new steel lock, drilled a side hole, threaded a lead wire, sealed with a small lead pellet. That pellet, too, stamped by the silver ring. The swallow smaller, but cut deeper. Caleb folded the orders, tossed them into the clerk's satchel, the ring glinting a knife line. He turned toward Jonas, an empty look through pupils pulled tight. No sneer, no shrug. Just stood, the paper speaking. Marisol stepped half a pace. Jonas raised his hand to bar without touch. The gesture hung half-air. The bone chip lay in his inner pocket, heavier now as if holding water. He did not draw it. The silver ring on the marshal's hand pressed one more seal, weight behind it.
By late afternoon, the auction yard behind the county storehouse. Ropes hung in coils on posts like snakes' guts. Jonas counted aloud. 1, 2, 3. Up to 30 head, each marked in white chalk on their backs, the chalk cracked by sweat. Sunlight licked the yard's edge, left long shadows, hoof strikes throwing dust sparks.
Caleb stood a few steps off, papers clamped under his arm, ring turned swallow face out. The marshal sat on a crate, boots on the slat, eyes neither shut nor open, fingers stroking the ring. The hammer beat on planks, nails sank even. When the 30th was let off, a last rope flipped the post, its ends snapped loud. Jonas signed the record with a borrowed iron pen, the name Hale smudged slightly by wind. The clerk raised the prepared annulment of guardianship, spread it in the yard for all to see. The seal box blank, wax warm in a tin dish. The marshal rose, stepped forward, pressed his ring into the wax, lifted the swallow's mark stamped deep, erasing all before. Jonas did not bring out the chip to countermark. Not the time. Wind in the yard died as the hammer struck the last time. Marisol took the paper, held it to the sun's last strip. Her eyes blinked once at dust, the seal sharp as a bite. Jonas folded it, slipped it to his coat's inner pocket, same place as the chip. The pocket grew heavier. No one said congratulations. The cattle gone, the pen empty, straw laid bare to dirt. Dust hung, refused to fall, rope still looped in hollow coils, their shadows on the wall like necks. The windmill on the hill still turned, but its sound was far. Jonas stood at the yard's edge, black ink still wet across his knuckle, his eyes darkened as the wind stilled. In his pocket the bone chip brushed the annulment paper, gave a thin click only close ears would hear. I stood close. I heard, and stayed silent. Rain tapped light on tin roof. The tin trembled like gooseflesh. Raindrops struck rivets, slow rhythm. On the table the gun rag lay flat, black with oil. The bone chip in the center, its burned edge still brown like a coffee bean husk. The oil lamp flickered, its wick breathing short yellow light pushing back the draft through the cracks. Marisol threaded hemp cord through the carved O in county, the hole wide enough for one coarse string without fray. The cord scraped her skin, left a red streak on her finger. She turned the chip once. The swallow slid past her shadow across the gun steel, then stopped. The knot tied as a slip loop, pulling both ways, smooth, not jammed. The brass tag on her wrist knocked the table dry, even rhythm like someone counting. Jonas sat at the table's head. The rag stroked the barrel back and forth, cloth speaking to steel. The annulment lay half spread by his left hand, the paper curled damp. The swallow seal from the ring still stamped in its box, purple ink not fully dry, shining under lamp. He held his finger on its corner, not pressing, only steadying from the draft. Stood near the door, my shadow broken on the wall by the lamp's sway. Marisol pulled a nail from the wall rack, its head smooth from hands. She tapped it straight, not the sharp end. Metal on metal, short sound, did not carry. She slipped the nail through the slip knot, tested it, once loose, once tight. The chip tilted, its burned edge showing like a scar from fire. She did not look at Jonas. Jonas did not look at her. The rain's sound filled the words unsaid. The stove door left ajar, ash white at its rim. Jonas set the gun down. His palm, still smeared with oil, pressed the rag, left a mark like a glove. He took the paper, folded along its perforation, folded again to fit the coat. The chip slid from the rag. The cord rasped, soft. The lamp coughed once, flame bent low. Another slip of paper lay beneath. A water crew receipt, its print faded with sweat. Heading marked, Lead Seal, Pipe 3B. Marisol glanced once, her eyelid caught half a blink. She pulled the chip back, threaded its cord through a clasp broken off a saddle strap. Old clasp, but its teeth bit the hemp sure. Outside the windmill turned its face, blades cutting like knives across bone. Rain ticked heavier now. Water slipped through a hole in the roof's corner, fell into a tin pan, each drop hitting round like marbles rolling. Jonas rose, pulled his coat over his shoulders, the collar rasping his stubble like sandpaper. He glanced at the keys on the post, trough, storehouse, stable. None for the water crew's bell. Marisol wore the chip on her wrist a moment, testing its weight, the hemp rope rubbing skin raw. She slipped it off, wound it twice around her hand, let it lie in her palm, the way Caleb had once done. Her eyes touched Jonas's once, then away. The brass tag at her wrist flipped face up, the letters worn blank. She hooked it to a button, left the chip bare. Jonas threw his raincoat across her shoulders without waiting thanks. He tucked pliers in his belt, wrapped a small thing in a rag, and slipped it to his pocket, an old canal man's whistle he'd kept from his hireling days. The edge chipped, but it still blew. Marisol held the rope's end, wound tight round her fingers. The lamp shook again. Rain went on. They reached the water gate as the wind swung east. Mud lay fresh across the path, boots sank, water climbed their legs. Fence posts slick, barbed wire groaned like teeth. The conduit steamed white as rain struck. Marisol tied the bone chip to the gate between two iron bars, rope cinched through the groove worn in the rain, smearing it like a thumbprint. He wiped once, darker but no clearer. Near the lever, the fresh lead seal showed ring cuts, deep and shallow. Jonas lifted the pliers, held, set them down, did not snap. He clamped the trough's brace instead, breath even, white in air. His eyes on the work, not on her, not on the chip. Lashed flow, ground drank, the smell of wet metal, mud, hot hide. No call, no count, no signature, only the chip's knock and the sound of water. Caleb absent, the marshal absent, the windmill still turned, distant, a nail in the sky. The ring mark in mud blurred by water, gone. Yesterday's wax smell gone. Today's smell was water through unclaimed land. Marisol let the post go, walked the bank, eyes down the run. Her shirt clung, shoulder bones sharp, rope swung, chip tapped, plack, clack, small, steady. I heard, Jonas heard, the herd did not, only drank. He went on, through gate, across cut, into pasture. His shadow shrank, dust rose under each step, settled again. No words, no names, only water, a middle thing choosing no side. I stood, hand on wire, cold in joints. The chip's tapping shrank as wind softened, then rose when it turned. Each knock a reminder. Here once was a seal, once a signature, once a hand pressed down, now only swung, empty, holding a place no one names. Jonas walked on, head bowed, eyes veiled, his shadow stitched into the flat light, thinned to a thread. The chip still struck, clack, clack, steady, as a clock with no numbers. Water moved, earth drank, names silent. I stayed at the fence, I watched, and silent. The bone chip still struck iron. Clack, clack, steady, as a clock with no face. One night it was luck, by morning a seal, at last hung at the gate like sentence. The wax cooled, the silver ring dulled. The annulment puffed in someone's pocket, its words mute. Water went through land with no name, across all ink. Marisol took the chip to ransom kin. Jonas burned his rights to break a trap. Caleb and the marshal wielded law like rope. Out here, which way's true? Wax or water? Which saves, which sells? I only know the tapping will go on. Each stroke asks, what won't swallow easy? Betrayal began with whom? The man with the ring, the one who took the chip, or the one who cast his papers into fire? If it were you, would you keep the chip, hang it on the gate, or break it clean? Best let the chip speak, and I will finish the rest.